Israel's Prime Minister has condemned the leaders of France, Britain and Canada after they called for an end to his country's renewed military offensive in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu called their remarks a huge prize for Hamas and insisted Israel would continue to press for what he described as a total victory over Hamas. Well, the joint statement signed by Sir Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and Mark Carney says while they have always supported Israel's right to defend Israelis against terrorism, the current escalation is wholly disproportionate. And it warns if Israel does not cease the renewed military offensive and lift its restrictions on humanitarian aid, we will take further concrete actions in response. Well, Israel eased its complete blockade of the territory on Monday and let in a handful of aid trucks, but the UN says far more supplies are needed. The bombardment of Gaza has continued overnight with reports of deadly airstrikes. This comes not long after the UN's humanitarian chief has called the first delivery of aid into Gaza for 11 weeks a drop in the ocean. We'll speak to our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams in a moment, but first let's hear from Yolande Knell in Jerusalem. Yolande, first those comments then from the UK, Canada and France and the reaction from Israel. Talk us through what's been happening.
Well, we've had the Israeli Prime Minister condemning that joint statement, saying it's a huge prize for Hamas and that it will invite further atrocities of the kind that was perpetrated on the 7th of October 2023, the deadly attack on southern Israel that killed some 1,200 people. He also said that Israel would continue to defend itself by just means until total victory. But I think this won't be so easily brushed off by the Israeli leader, because these are important allies of the country, the UK, France and Canada, that have come out with this very harshly worded statement, really some of the strongest criticism that we've seen so far of Israel's handling of the war, and threatening concrete actions as well, without going into what those might be. Now, this all happening as we continue to see Israel's deadly bombardment, this intense military offensive going on in the Gaza Strip overnight. The Hamas-run civil defence is saying that at least 44 people have been killed, most of those within the space of about half an hour, we understand from local sources, when there were Israeli strikes that hit a school being used as a shelter for displaced people in Gaza City. In the southern part of the Gaza Strip, there was a fuel station that's disused, being used as a tent city for displaced people that was hit, a residential building of 3 stories as well. And, still we're waiting to see what aid goes into Gaza in the course of the day. Lots of safety and logistical issues given the ongoing Israeli military offensive. But now that Israel has eased this blockade, it's been a total blockade of the Gaza Strip for 11 weeks now, with no food, no medicines, no fuel, no shelters going into Gaza. There's really a dire humanitarian situation. And we've heard that only 9 lorry loads of aid were cleared for entry into Gaza one day ago. A senior UN official has told the BBC this morning that there are this clearance that's been given for 100 or so lorry loads. But of course, this is being seen as a drop in the ocean, given the huge needs of a population of 2 million people.
Yolande, for the moment, thank you very much. Yolande Knell in Jerusalem. As we said, we'll speak to Paul Adams in just a moment. But Yolande was referring there to the aid situation in Gaza. Well, the UN's humanitarian relief chief, Tom Fletcher, a former British diplomat, has been speaking to the BBC in the last hour, saying just 5 aid trucks were cleared to enter after Israel's blockade was lifted, but are stuck on the border.
Well, that's a drop in the ocean. And let's be clear, those 5 trucks are just sat on the other side of the border right now. They've not reached the communities they need to reach. And, let me describe what is on those trucks. This is baby food, baby nutrition. There are 14,000 babies that will die in the next 48 hours unless we can reach them. This is not food that Hamas are going to steal. No, we run the risk of looting. We run the risks of being hit as part of the Israeli military offensive. We run all sorts of risks trying to get that baby food through to those mothers who cannot feed their children right now because they're malnourished.
Tom Fletcher. Well, let's speak to our diplomatic correspondent, Paul Adams. And these comments from these 3 allies of Israel, Paul, I mean, how significant are they?
It feels pretty significant. I mean, that some of that language that was used in the statement issued last night was almost unprecedented. You know, the level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable, they said. They described the Hamas attacks of October the 7th as heinous and said that Israel had the right to respond. But they described the escalation as, in their words, wholly disproportionate. And the fact that the long statement included a warning towards the end of further concrete steps certainly will have the Israelis wondering whether some of Israel's closest allies are now beginning to think about things like recognizing the state of Palestine, something that the French have indicated they might do at a conference in New York next month, possibly reconsidering arms sales. Britain has already had a partial suspension of licenses since late last year, possibly revisiting the kind of trade deals that countries have with Israel. There are many, many measures that would be available if countries decided that a red line has finally been crossed and that it is time not just to issue harsh words of condemnation, but to actually show Israel through action that enough is enough.
Paul, there's already an international criminal court warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. So he politically surely is having to weigh up his options very carefully, considering the makeup of his government.
Yes, I mean, look, that's been a reality now since the middle of last year. He knows perfectly well that there are countries, including Britain, where he cannot safely travel without the possibility, a theoretical possibility perhaps, but a possibility nonetheless, of being arrested. I think the point that some of Israel's actually some former Israeli leaders, including Ehud Olmert, the former prime minister, make is that this prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has led Israel into territory that the country has simply never been in before. And that territory is that of an international pariah. And what you see in the comments over the last few days, and particularly that statement last night, is the very real spectre of Israel plunging further and further into that kind of territory, which, if you consider the level of horror and outrage and international goodwill towards Israel that accompanied the attacks by Hamas on October the 7th, is an astonishing reversal of fortune for Israel. The last 18 months have eroded that goodwill to the point now where some of Israel's closest allies are beginning to sound extremely exasperated.